Guided by Harshnag the Frost Giant, the adventurers travel to the spine of the world, scaling icy mountains to reach a temple built by the giant lords of Astoria. Within this complex, they find the Eye of the Allfather, a chamber that the ancient giants used as an oracle. Here, the characters eventually choose a path that leads them to the storm giants of Maelstrom, who hold the key to restoring order among giants. Hello everyone, I'm Alex, and today we're going to discuss Chapter 4 of Storm King's Thunder. This video will be divided into 3 sections: the Eye of the Allfather, the quest for the giant relics, and the encounter with Iymrith. Let's dive right in. Be sure to make the journey to the Eye of the Allfather memorable. It is likely that the last leg of this journey will begin in Mirabar, so plan accordingly. Be sure your party is prepared with cold weather clothing and food for a long journey. Take a look at the wilderness travel section of Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden, for some additional ideas for encounters and complications. Having blizzards and avalanches hinder the party can be a great flavor and nice break from the hacking and slashing that the normal encounter table provides. The encounter table from Rime can also be used here if you need more ideas. If you check the Icewind Dale section in Storm King's Thunder Chapter 3, there is a small encounter table that I think would also be appropriate to use here. I recommend at least 3 encounters or complications along the final 2 days. For the Eye of the Allfather, I will be splitting the dungeon into the classic 5-room dungeon. Be sure to go over the general features of the dungeon. This sidebar is extremely useful and will provide information for a large number of situations that the players may find themselves in. The most important feature to remember is frost. There are really 2 ways the Eye of the Allfather goes. Either the party goes in through the front entrance, or they find the secret cave entrance off to the side. It is worth noting that Harshnag cannot fit through this side entrance. I will start with the route most parties take, the front door. The entryway is dark, which means the party is likely to use light sources. Harshnag is also with the party, and his axe magically glows when in extreme cold, which means that the barbarians at the end of the hall will most certainly be alerted to the player's presence unless Harshnag waits at the entrance and someone scouts ahead without light sources. For the barbarian conflict, I recommend having Wormblod give a little exposition before or during the conflict to provide a little lore on the Great Worm tribe. I would even allow the party a single chance to leave the way they came unmolested if they wish before rolling initiative. The fight should be relatively straightforward. Try to make sure the barbarians are spaced out before initiative is rolled, or that the party is at the end of the hall, so they don't all get wiped out by one AoE spell. My final tip for this fight is to have Wormblod's Dragon Wormling be on a chain leash. Allow this creature to pester the players during combat, but as soon as it takes damage, it hides behind Wormblod. If Wormblod dies or loses his grip on the leash, otherwise, the Wormling flies up one of the ledges and scurries down the dark hallway, hoping to escape its master's imprisonment. If the players find a way up the ledge later, they can track it down, break its leash, and maybe gain a new companion. If the players locate the side entrance and decide to check it out, things can play out a little differently. Harshnag cannot fit, and will have to wait for the players to emerge and direct him inside later. The spider tunnels are very creepy, and you can pretty much run them as written. If you're using Roll20 or something similar, I recommend having dynamic lighting or a tool that works similar, so the tunnels the players have traveled through already are not still revealed later. If the players find and save Nori, then their encounter with Wormblood can go very differently. I recommend having Wormblod leave after locating Nori, rather than still challenging the party, so they can encounter him again during the hunt for the giant relics later in the chapter. My only other tip for the spider tunnels is to add a giant spider or 2 to the Spider Queen fight, as she can be pretty easy by herself. Onum's Temple is the focus of the dungeon, and the party will have to pass through this room multiple times. After the first time Harshnag enters this room, he essentially stays here the rest of the adventure. Harshnag is in awe of the statues of the giant pantheon. Have him be mostly silent when the party enters and just wander around until he stops in front of Thrym. Harshnag wants to investigate the runes, statues, and weapons in this room when he arrives. And if the party isn't interested or is stuck, they can continue to explore the temple while Harshnag investigates. Eventually, the party or Harshnag should deduce that the missing weapon is needed to continue. Some of the traps that can be set off here can TPK your entire party. Because of that, I highly recommend having Harshnag warn the players of the powers that be in this room. The trapped hall and upstairs quarters you can run as written. Be sure to describe the giant statues as the players approach. The statue upstairs is harmless, but the party will be suspicious of it regardless after what happens downstairs. If the players loot the shard of the ice rune, they can use it to help identify the ice rune needed to open the archway in Onum's temple. The boss of this dungeon is waiting for the players in the feast hall, curled in the alcove. Have Harshnag assist the players with this fight if needed, as this creature can kill a single player easily if no one is around to save them. The book provides little to no context for why a Remoraz is here, but it implies it is stuck here. I recommend giving the Remoraz a small lair beneath the room composed of a collection of tunnels dug by it. The Remoraz can use these tunnels to burrow around the room and surprise players, and avoid damage for some rounds of combat. The temple is made of stone, and the Remoraz normally wouldn't be able to burrow here, but I think it adds a lot to this encounter. If you wish, you can explain that areas of the floor look rough and worn, and consider them difficult terrain. Perhaps only these areas can be burrowed in and out of, which gives the players a bit more focus. I would also add a small hoard in the Remoraz's lair, if the players are brave enough to traverse it later. The hoard could be some treasure or a stash of Remoraz eggs in a pool of water that the Remoraz keeps warm with its body. The eggs could also provide a great reason for why the Remoraz is here to begin with. It's simply a secluded place to have its babies. Finally, the players have arrived in the Chamber of the Oracle. Battle-worn and likely low on resources, the party is keen to finally get some direction and answers. I recommend running the room as written, Urgaron's ghost and all. However, I would leave Blagothgris out of the adventure if possible, unless your players are keen on taking on that dungeon. If the party seems intent on challenging Blagothgris, you could have him be located in Lin Armal with Sansuri instead, so the players aren't totally derailed from the book, but do whatever you think is best. For me, I just informed the players out of the game that the dungeon is picked from another adventure that we may run in the future, so they avoided it. The questions that the players ask vary in usefulness, but eventually they should get the prompt from the Oracle to seek out the giant relics. Once they get this quest, it should be clear to the players that they will be returning here in the future. I would inform the players that when they return, they will once again be able to question the Oracle, and to make sure they are prepared. If you have been teasing Iymrith or the Kraken Society, the party may have questions about either of these two topics, which should yield very interesting results. I recommend subtly pushing the players towards overarching campaign questions like this, rather than short-term questions. For example, one of my parties spent multiple questions during the second visit asking about Jarl Stovold's defenses and Denzians of his lair, which I considered wasted opportunities. The hunt begins with the players leaving the temple and getting, quite possibly, the greatest handout of any adventure. A fully crewed airship equipped with siege weapons. The airship of a cult can be run as written and doesn't need much modification. My only tip is I would give the cultists a little more personality. I would have the cultists jest with each other constantly about the party's impending doom, making bets to each other before every dungeon on who will return. The cultists worship Clouth, but they're still humanoids. They are content to ride around the skies, eating the fancy rations and alcohol that has been stored for them, enjoying the protection of able-bodied adventurers. They may grow a bit lazy as the journey goes on and develop more personality. I had Delphine start off as a very professional, almost stoic, harsh leader, but she eventually grew into a laid-back scallywag who enjoyed counting the treasure the party had accumulated in the hull of the airship. For the aerial travel, I recommend having an encounter the day they are going to arrive or leave at any given destination. This ensures the players don't just blow all their best spells and abilities on a random encounter, only to get a free rest right after. or they have already spent some of their resources before the encounter begins, as most of the aerial encounters are relatively easy. Using Harshnaggg's map, the players are able to travel to each of the spirit mounds. When the players want to travel to a particular mound, allow them to make a history check to recall information about the tribe that is in that area. If they fail this check, they could visit a local settlement or town and seek out a historian to provide this information if desired. For each spirit mound, ask the players if they wish to arrive during the day or night. Additionally, ask if they want to land the airship away from the mound and approach on foot, or if they wish, they can land at the burial site. They may also choose to fly over before deciding. Their choices can have an effect on how the encounter for each particular mound plays out. Most parties are going to go to every single mound, even though going to only one is required. These are meant to be quick quests, and you should be completing 2 to 3 a session. The biggest issue these locations have is size. The maps provided are scales at 50 feet per square. I recommend greatly scaling that down to 10 feet per square to make a combat run smoother at each location. I can't stress this enough. These maps are just too big to be functional. I am honestly convinced it is a mistake or oversight. Okay, now I am going to very briefly go over each mound and some specific tips for each, if any. One of the more interesting mounds with a potentially challenging combat encounter. The way the players enter the well is what makes the encounter interesting. Not a lot of notes for this particular encounter otherwise. I would run this as written. This is simply a test of the character's mettle to see if they will slay the elks who do not inhibit their goal. This mound can involve 2 potentially hard encounters if the players decide to approach from the ground. Additionally, if obtained by a player, the oath bow is an extremely powerful weapon, especially if used by a ranger or fighter. Simply don't allow your players to encounter the oath bow if you are concerned about its strength. Run this encounter as written at the tree. This mound is the closest to the Eye of the Allfather, so it is likely that the players will head here first. It is also the tribe that they just had an encounter with in the temple itself. If the players didn't kill Wormblod earlier, he is encountered here, with whatever remains of his party. To retrieve the relic from the mound, Wormblod will have to be slain. If he still lives when the players arrive, I suggest having the coatl that is within the altar reach out to them and pressure them into confronting him there and now. The charm of restoration that is granted by the coatl is very critical to the remainder of the relic hunt, as one can become easily cursed while grave robbing at these sites. I would recommend having the tribal warriors back down when Wormblod is slain, but the berserkers and his shaman are loyal to him and fight to the death. If Wormblod is about to die, he makes a break for the gong and strikes it, hoping that the young Remorazes slay everyone in the cavern. If the players killed Wormblod earlier, they can basically just walk in and retrieve the relic. I recommend having the young Remorazes emerge regardless, so an encounter still occurs. This encounter can be run as written. It plays out just fine. The thunder beasts actually being dinosaurs is always a fun revelation for the party. This encounter has a connection to Princes of the Apocalypse, like in Chapter 1 with the air cultists. This time, the earth cultists have made an appearance, looking to steal the same item the players are after. It is always fun to have a little competition for a MacGuffin, but the cults of elemental evil don't really have any connection to the overall narrative. If you wish, you could replace the earth cultists with cultists from the Kraken Society. Another idea is to have the cloud giants who stole the Night Stone in Chapter 1 make a reappearance, now hunting for the One Stone. Either way, the tribals should emerge from the forest and confront the party before they have a chance to escape with their prize. The history check for this location should indicate that 2 different tribes call this mound home, perhaps hinting at the possibility of 2 relics being located here. I would suggest this idea to players who rolled particularly high on the history check, or if they consulted with a local historian. If the players arrive during the day and don't bother the ravens, you get an encounter added to your back pocket that you can unleash whenever you see a good opportunity, which is great. I suggest having the gray wolves assist with this hunt if their relic was also stolen. Additionally, I would use berserkers rather than tribal warriors. The best time to have this ambush would be on the player's airship or while they are at sea searching for Hecaton. Remember, if the werewolves attack anyone who isn't a member of the party, like the cultists on the airship or perhaps another member of their current crew, be sure to keep track of it and if they contract lycanthropy. If the players arrive to Raven Rock at night, then they get to have an intense battle with the werewolves right then and there, and they have the added bonus of not being hunted down later. My only suggestion for this encounter is to have the 3 stone giants who recently desecrated the altar be present, currently performing said desecration instead. After the players fight the stone giants or wait for them to leave, they can proceed with the collection of the relic. If they linger after locating the relic or take too much time finding it, have the griffins show up as well. I suggest running this encounter as written. An enemy that seems to reappear after being defeated is demoralizing for a party and makes for an interesting challenge. Be sure to make it clear that the new ghost that appears is clearly the ghost of a different humanoid, so the players get clued in that the ghosts are not infinite. The players have finally returned with various giant relics and are ready for some show and tell with the Oracle. Returning with the relics is relatively straightforward. I recommend running that encounter as written. Don't forget to allow the players the opportunity to ask the Oracle questions once again. Your players should leave the Oracle's chamber with a new sense of purpose. This new purpose should quickly become overshadowed by what awaits them inside the Temple of the Allfather. When the players traverse the portal back into the chamber, I recommend having some suspenseful music ready for Iymrith's arrival. The book implies that Iymrith has come to the temple to question the Oracle herself. While this makes sense, I would have her arrival be due to the players becoming close to ousting her. Iymrith has come to learn all she can and destroy the temple so that it can no longer be used against her. Harshnag is the only hope that the characters have to escape. I would have Iymrith give a little exposition when she arrives, claiming that the party will no longer be allowed to meddle unopposed. To get the most out of this encounter, you want the party to test their might against Iymrith. If the party flees immediately, then it isn't much of an encounter. One option is to encourage them out of character to test their abilities against this foe. Another option is to talk to a single player before the game and inform them that a special encounter will be occurring in the next game session. Tell this player that they may want to run away or even be told to, but encourage them to see the encounter through to the end. You may also not need to do anything of the sort, as the party may have a strong bond with Harshnag and could be unwilling to let him fight alone. One reminder for this encounter: Harshnag has 1 legendary resistance. If he is going to fail Iymrith's frightful presence saving throw, he uses his legendary resistance instead. Another option is to make Harshnag immune to the frightened condition. My final idea for this encounter is, after Harshnag desecrates the statue, have him drop his axe and attempt to grapple Iymrith. The book suggests this as well, but I'm just going to expand on this a bit. The visual is extremely flavorful. A mighty frost giant wrapping his arms around the dragon's neck, causing her to flail about the room as the temple collapses on itself in the last possible round before collapse. Harshnag throws Iymrith's head and neck onto the ground and makes a break for the portal. Right when he begins his stride towards the portal, the room collapses as the players watch from down the hall. As these rocks are tumbling down, bright purple light pierces through the cracks, which is Iymrith's teleport spell. Harshnag's fate remains uncertain as the temple continues to collapse and eventually sinks into the mountain. The players should barely escape, being saved from this collapse by the airship. Well, that is the video for Chapter 4. There's a lot to unpack here. I would recommend just to take it one session at a time, like with any chapter. Keep in mind, this is the last chapter of the book where your players will be exploring the Overland map, so it is also your last chance to throw in any add-ons or additional quests you wanted to run for this adventure. Hope you found this video helpful. Be sure to check back for more Storm King's Thunder and 5th edition content. Next up are the layers of the 5 giant lords. Thanks for watching.